This conference is in its design and what people share with each other here very different from all the other 9 conferences we had. There was much talk about philosophical practice, and this conference was showing philosophical practice, and they do something different. We are balancing on something on what you could say the vita contemplativa and the vita activa, and it is a come and go. It's a beautiful book by Hermann Hesse. That's Glasperlenspiel, and that's all about this theme of being in the world of thinking and being in the world of acting. And that's what we do, and that's a bit of our fate as philosophical practitioners, because we aren't at home in one of them. We are only at home with the edge.
So we have this issue, since professionalism is a very serious topic here, and one that was treated with a lot of optimism and seriousness in our educational meeting. How do we develop professionalism and so forth, and how do we collaborate to do it? I think that something we're going to need in a lighter vein are philosophy jokes about philosophers. To show that we're a true profession, we'll need to have jokes about it. So the problem is this: there are philosophical jokes, but only philosophers get them. This is the challenge, okay? And then only on a good day. So everybody gets the lawyer jokes, everybody gets the rabbi jokes, everybody gets this, but nobody gets the philosopher jokes, and this is the challenge. There was an example of Morgenbesser's humor. There was this guy talking about the asymmetries in philosophy of language and philosophy of mathematics, where we have certain asymmetries. For example, 2 negatives make a positive in arithmetic. Whereas in grammar also a double negation is an affirmation in most grammatical languages. Whereas this speaker said 2 affirmations do not constitute a negation. Morgenbesser said, yeah. So you look at this, the roaring and the world rolling in the aisles says only philosophers would find this funny. You try this, do this social experiment, try it on non-philosophers, and they just, this is our problem. This is, Monty Python, the philosophers playing soccer, you remember? They all were trained philosophically, John Cleese and all those guys. They use that philosophy, not just to make fun of us, but also to understand a little bit of the inward side of our humor, yeah? So I have a couple more. Russell is my favorite. I already regaled one of you with this, but Bertrand Russell gave a lecture once, and this woman at the back of the hall got up in the question period, and she said to him, "Are you a solipsist?" And he thought about it for a moment. He said, "Well, at the end of the day, probably I am a solipsist." And then she said, I am too. She said, "Isn't it a pity? Isn't it a pity there aren't more of us?" Genuinely funny, right? So I think this, but now our challenge is to invent some jokes about philosophers which the non-philosophers will find funny, and this will then enhance our professionalism, okay, via ridicule. That's the theory. Case study: a woman comes to Buddha and says, and this is the mustard seed parable. You know this, those of you who don't. It's a case study for us. So the woman comes to Buddha and says, "I've lost my baby has died." She's inconsolable because her baby has died. And she thinks that Buddha is some kind of wizard or magician who can bring her baby back to life, because the rumors have already spread that he has superhuman powers. And so she's inconsolable, and she wants her baby to come back to life. So Buddha is her last resort. And he says to her, he doesn't want to tell her the truth just yet, because he sees how sad she is. And you would make her cry more, Michael, and then she'd get better. But Buddha, what Buddha did was he said to her, I can help you, but what you need to do first is go to every home in the village and collect from each home a mustard seed, from each home which has not known death. So any family which has not been touched by death, you get 1 mustard seed. You bring me the mustard seeds, and then I can help you. So she's thinking only about her baby and her sorrow, and she goes from door to door. And of course, every house has been touched by death. Has death touched your house? Yes. Has death touched your house? Yes. And she goes through the whole village, and she comes back. She has no 1 mustard seed. And the parable is, of course, to make her understand that her problem is everybody's problem, and that she's, in a sense, as the Stoics would say, taking it too personally. That the world is impersonal, And of course she's in sorrow, and her baby can't be brought back. But there are other possibilities in life. And so the first step is to realize that one's own suffering is not unique. Always to understand that other people suffer too. And so this actually is not the cure, but it's a step on the way to understanding the reality in a deeper way of the situation. And then one can take steps to do things to reduce the sorrow. But first understand that it's shared. Get out of one's own shell. That's easier said than done. That's the parable. But it seems to me that it's arguably a case study in philosophical counseling. He didn't sell her a religion. Right? He didn't say, okay, here's what you do. He didn't give her a prescription that had to do with any power outside herself. Right? He did not give her religio, bonding to a godhead. He didn't do that. He didn't give her a prescription. He didn't say, here, take 2 of these, call me in the morning. He didn't do any of those things. He gave her an idea which would lead to a lot of self-empowerment in a philosophical way. For me, that's a kind of case study. So Socrates thought that people had some inner wisdom which they just needed a little help to manifest. Yeah, well, isn't that Buddhism? I mean, isn't that a form? Isn't that similar to saying we all have, Buddha nature, which we need help to manifest, but it's inside there already? Yes. So aren't these ancient Greeks Buddhists? Well, and that's why they have the silks, because they believe, they're not trying to appropriate it, they just look at it through that lens. I think it's wonderful. It's a way of East meeting West. And they recognize that it's a secular philosophy. This is a cultural Buddhism. And so they recognize a secular philosophy when they see one. And that's a beautiful connection, again, from antiquity. In the end, people are afraid to say things. People become afraid to think things that they can't say. So we have to, my remedy is insensitivity training. And one of the exercises is to look at the great insensitivists and see how much they've accomplished toward realizing that if you take offense, it's your responsibility. If I lie to you, that's different. If I harm you, it's different. That's my harm, is an unwilling injury inflicted. No one can even consent under most civilized laws. You cannot consent to be harmed. But, you can certainly consent to be deceived. We're all self-deceived. So we've all consented to that. And then we can be deceived by others, and Kant thinks we've consented, and therefore it doesn't have the same degree of moral culpability as a lie. A lie is absolutely, forbidden, right? Verboten. But we can certainly deceive. We can certainly deceive one another. And we do. And the same, I would argue, the same analogy, this goes through the distinction between offense and harm, goes through in the same way, that we should not harm one another. There are lots of, principles. My favorite is John Stuart Mill's, the libertarian principle, that the only warrant the state has to constrain an individual is to prevent that person from harming someone else. Offense doesn't fall into that category. Because if I offer you an offense, if you know how to use your will, you can refuse it. You can't refuse a harm in the same way. And harms are not all personal. One could be struck by lightning. You can't refuse it. You can't say, I refuse to be struck by lightning. It's too late. But you can certainly refuse an offense. Von Karajan is my favorite example of this, because he was an egomaniac and completely insensitive, and therefore a reservoir of very funny stories. He was walking briskly down the street in Chicago one day, and as he had no time. When he got after a concert, he got into his car, and the chauffeur said, where do you want to go? He said, it doesn't matter, they need me everywhere. We could have a whole conference on this guy, okay? And he's walking briskly down the street, and then this other guy who doesn't see him, they collided on a street corner, and they recoiled from the force of the collision. And the guy who collided with Von Karajan looked at him and said, imbecile. And Von Karajan looked back, he took off his hat, he said, Von Karajan. Absolutely no offense. He refused to take offense. This is social judo, okay? This is called, I teach this in sensitivity workshops. It's called social judo. You reflect it back. The harder they try to offend you, the more it reflects back to them. It's perfect, perfect reflection. People who have a lot of money are not happier necessarily than people who don't have a lot of money. There's a sort of, disconnect statistically. There's no firm correlation between wealth and happiness. But they show that people who, if you're going to be unhappy, much better off if you have a little money. Because then you can afford to indulge your unhappiness. You can afford to try and escape your unhappiness. If you don't have, if you don't have bus fare to go downtown, you're sitting there unhappy. There's nothing you can do. You feel more trapped in it. People who have a little money have the illusion that they can, that they can do something about their unhappiness. But it's not a pursuit, and that's why they never catch it with money. It's inside. It's Thomas Jefferson's only real mistake, I think, is this pursuit of happiness phrase. It's nothing up there. It's all in here. And I'm getting happier all the time. And my mouth is actually getting smaller on some days, and I plan to have less on the business card. Okay, does that dispel the rumors? Tell me later. I mean, we keep meeting, so we must have a reason, and I think that we do have a sense of community, which has been greatly enhanced at this event. It's been revitalized and enhanced. We get to catch up in a very personal and prudential way. We get to catch up with friends and colleagues. We have gained an enormous advantage in having these workshops instead of lectures. We've gained great insight. I've been to a few of them, as many as possible. I've played hooky once or twice, but I've been really there, and I've appreciated the workshops because we are people who are practical, and we need more of these, and I hope it continues in the future. We gained also the advantage of the master class over the keynote lecture, okay, which is another big advantage. And I agree with it, I support it, I hope, and the opinion has been expressed throughout. There's been an aspiration on the part of most people I've spoken to have more of this master class and workshop format. We have gained momentum, a lot of momentum, because all of these things have been moved forward. And so every time we come together, people have new experiences, new cases, and new insights. The momentum develops, and we go forward with that. And we've gained, personally, something that I really appreciate about this event and events like it is the gain of reflective space. It's something we provide for our clients, is it not? We give them, I call it, it's not my term, but someone coined it, it's a great term, the idea that they can have a kind of refuge in which to think. Most people don't have that. We're used to thinking, and so we build one for ourselves. But we can help our clients by creating for them a place where they can feel free and secure to reflect without being judged, and so forth. So creating reflective space is something we do a lot for others. Where do we get it? Well, we get it here, where we go to a workshop or we go to to someone's master class, and then we can luxuriate ourselves. So we can be off duty as practitioners and take advantage in a wonderful way of someone else creating reflective space for us, and I've gained a lot of that here. I was in Singapore a few years ago, and the philosophy department there describing, they'd heard this only for the first time, yeah? They're English, but they're 70% Han Chinese, first language English. And they heard very politely, they listened to some account of what is philosophical practice, and then one of the guys in the back put up a sign and said, this sounds like advanced common sense. Isn't that great? So, Americans are supposed to be pragmatic, Dutch are supposed to be practical, and we are all those things, and the Chinese also are supposed to be, they have a reputation for being very practical people. So that was their first take on this advanced common sense. I like it. It's what we do. Okay, we have tremendous opportunities everywhere. Let's build on this. Let's build on all of it. Let's go forward with this positive outlook. Find ways to practice. Find ways to improve what we do, learn from each other, encourage the next generation. We'll meet again in Seoul, if not sooner, in 2012. Thank you very much.
Big hand for Evelyn. That's how organized they do it. Thank you all for making this happen. This was what I would think this wonderful conference. It's like the Olympic Games. This was the best conference ever. Thank you.